Water. Earth. Fire. Air. Long ago, Nickelodeon aired an incredible show. Then, everything changed when Shyamalan attacked. Only Brian and Mike, co-creators of the show, could stop him. But when the movie needed them most, they vanished. A few years passed, and Bright introduced a new avatar, a waterbender named Korra. And although some of Korra's stories were great, it had a long way to go if it was going to bring Avatar back. But I believe there's still hope for this franchise. Alright, I'm Savart.
And I'm Chaos.
And welcome to the Bossing Say Book Club. So,
The BS Book Club for short.
The BS Book Club. We're full of bullshit. So if you're currently watching Avatar or just going back through it for just that sweet nostalgia, this is actually the show for you. So each week what we're going to be doing is we're going to go over the episode which has its name in the has its title rather in the bottom of the screen. So for example, today is both The Boy and the Iceberg and The Avatar Returns. And the reason for that is because we're treating two-parters as if they were one episode, because that's kind of how they were written, and they were also aired at the same time. So it makes more sense to lump them in together and discuss them all at once, instead of forcing them into separate bits when that's really not how they were meant to be experienced. So, like I said, today we're talking about The Boy and the Iceberg and Avatar Returns. For anyone who might be watching us live, if you want to catch any archives or you miss an episode, you can go to youtube.com and look for Bossing Say Book Club there. That's where all the VODs will be uploaded. If you're watching this on YouTube instead of the stream, come on by. We're at youtube.com/SavartFarmer, which is spelled SIVARTFARMER. And for anyone in chat, we will be talking to you guys in a segment at the end of this stream, just some audience appreciation. And if you don't catch us live but still want to be heard there, you can email us at basingsebookclub@gmail.com. Basingsebookclub is BASINGSEBOOKCLUB. Again, that's just Bossing Say Book Club. So, Chaos, do you have any past experience with Avatar? I know I grew up with it. I know you did to an extent, but for example, I watched the show like 1,000 different times. I had it on DVD, and it was like one of the only things I had to watch.
Oh, for sure. I grew up with it. I recently watched it again back a couple years ago when it came out on Netflix. I watched the entire series over again.
That quarantine binge watch that everyone did.
So yeah, it's definitely been a part of my life. I've always been a huge fan of the show. I think it's artistically great. The storyline is great, and we will get into that later.
Yes, but first, before we get into the meat of the podcast, we will be doing a trivia section at the beginning of every episode. Basically how it's going to work is we're going to have about 5 questions for each other. I'm doing trivia this time around since I'm hosting. So there's just 5 questions. As long as you get over 50% of the questions right, so 3 out of the 5, you win and you get a point for that episode. Whoever has the most points by the end of the episode will win. If there's any list questions that make you list something, as long as you're able to list over half the things, you're good. So if there's 2 things to list, you have to get both of them right because it's over 50%. But if there's like 3, you just have to get 2 out of the 3, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's basically it. So we're going to start off the trivia section with a question that's going to be kind of a recurring thing of mine called, "Who's that Pokemon?" So basically what you have to do is you have to name all of the animals that specifically showed up on screen. And if they have, since Avatar famously has like hybrid animals, which 2 specific hybrid animals showed up in this. If you get a bonus point if you can name what those hybrids are. So just as a to be fair, there were 3 different animals that showed up in this. 2 of them were are specific combinations. Do you know what they were?
I know there was the tiger seal that showed up in the beginning of the episode when Aang was released from the Iceberg, all that shit. And I know the penguins. I don't remember what the penguins were specifically combined with. They just called them penguins.
Okay.
And of course, Appa, who is a bison. I assume part beaver because of the tail.
So you were really close. So yes, tiger seals are definitely one of them. There's penguins, which are penguin seals, and Appa, which is a. I don't think his species name is ever actually said in the show. In either
they
shows,
just call them flying bison.
Yeah. They're just called flying bison. So this isn't actually part of the trivia, but do you know the 3 things that they call flying bison, including flying bison? This isn't actually part of the trivia. So yeah,
I do not.
It's flying bison, sky bison, and my favorite of the 3, the wind buffalo. But we'll get to that in a later episode. Yeah, it's.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get to that episode.
No, yeah, it's my absolute favorite. But also, so there is a secret 4th animal that's really important. It doesn't have a combination name. Do you know what it is? If you get this, you get a bonus point.
The fish.
Yes. So you get 1 point and 1 bonus point, so that's 2 points for you so far.
Starting off strong.
All right. What is the first on-screen bending? I mean, what was it used to do?
Technically, it was Katara's water bending when she caught a fish.
Exactly. Good job. That is
unless you count the opening credits.
I do not.
Okay.
Because that's not really meant to show you what bending can do, and this is the first like actual practical use. But yeah, I don't really count the intro. I'm sure someone will disagree with me on that.
Yeah, there's bound to be disagreements. That's a societal thing. It's whatever. This is our stream. We do it how we want to. Damn
it. So 3rd question: Who frees Aang and how?
So I think it's Katara, and she actually uses Sokka's, not his boomerang. It's the club thing that he uses.
Yes. What I wrote in my notes specifically is Katara with Sokka's smashy thing.
On a technicality, you could say when she threw her fit that sort of knocked it.
I mean, that didn't free Aang though. He was still stuck. Like if she didn't go a smack and like he'd be in there still.
Yeah, that's fair.
Also, interesting point. Katara won the 100-Year War. Like 100%. Because Sokka said, "Don't do that. Don't free that kid in there." But anyway, moving on. So that's
I actually almost got that question wrong because I thought to myself, I was like, wait a minute. Was it Aang's sneeze, technically?
No!
Water bending? Technically, the sneeze was accidental bending.
No, the sneeze is bending, but that's not the first on-screen one.
But it was Katara's water bending. She caught a fish with it, and then Sokka screwed it up, as Sokka does.
Yeah. So, how old is Aang?
Technically, 112.
Good.
He's 12.
I was thinking that one might have tripped you up, but yeah, it's 112.
Because he was trapped in the iceberg for 100 years. If you watch the show, that's one of the first things that they mention. I think that's actually mentioned in the first episode. Also,
important thing, if you haven't watched both episodes, do that before you watch this. Please, God.
Yeah, there will be... Oh, if you haven't seen it, there will be a lot of spoilers in the episode.
We're going to be ripping this episode apart.
As we mentioned, we've both been longtime fans of the series. We've both seen it a lot. Yeah. We're not going to go into any details of episodes further than what we are talking about today, what the title is.
Nothing past Avatar Returns will be discussed at all. I might loosely allude to things, but you're probably not going to pick up on that until you get to that episode.
But if you haven't seen the series at all, if you haven't watched these first 2 episodes, I would recommend going watch them first, because there will be spoilers for those episodes in this podcast.
Yes, and as I mentioned at the beginning, that's kind of what this podcast is for. So like, you can come to back to this episode on YouTube and kind of like, celebrate the show along with us as you're watching it.
And if you want to, during the quizzing section, you can pause it and quiz yourself. That could be a fun thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, you know what? As we only have one question left, put what you think your answers are down in the comments. I'm gonna make that a thing from now on. We're working out the kinks. So the last and final and
the last, of course.
Yes, the last and final episode.
Two very different things.
Why does Aang, specifically at the end of the episodes, why does Aang go into the Avatar state?
This is a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know he falls into the ocean, and at first he's just sinking, and then he hears Katara's voice. And her calling out for him just kind of triggered something in him, I guess. That's how he got stuck in the iceberg to begin with.
So yeah, I wrote down Katara desperately crying out his name, because that's when he gets the angry face with like the really like strong like cheek lines.
That is one of my favorite waterbending moves in the entire series.
Oh yeah, the tornado. We'll get to that eventually, but that move is only done a handful of times. It's really cool. Anyway, so you got everything right with a total of a score of 6 out of 5, which sadly still only gets you 1 point.
Hey, it's a point. We're starting off strong.
So far, you are in the lead for this series-long competition.
Oh, we got a long way to go.
Oh, yeah. And to start it off, this episode has the first and only alternate ending this show ever got. Which is my first note.
There's an alternate ending?
Not ending, sorry, opening. I spoke incorrectly.
Oh, yeah, the alternate opening.
Yeah, because Katara's got... Yeah, because Katara's got the heavy duty of introducing this entire universe to the audience.
Oh yeah, introducing all the history. She goes into the Avatar being the only one who can stop the firebenders, and how he disappeared 100 years ago. But this is the only time we really get a lot more information in the opening than the rest of the series. Yeah, and also I think
the person that they show, the old man that they show at the beginning is I'm going to get into this more when we get to Aang actually showing up. But they do a really good job of misdirecting you as to who the Avatar is. So that when Zuko ends up hard revealing that it's Aang, like most people will have caught on by that point, but it still might surprise a couple of viewers who hasn't really clicked with yet. Like, holy shit! Wait, he's the Avatar.
So one thing that does kind of bother me about this episode is actually how surprised at least Katara is when the big reveal happens, because they had been alluding to it the whole time. She was like, hey, this may be my only chance to become an actual waterbender. But then she was like super shocked to find out that he was the Avatar.
And also she was like, hey, I think you're from 100 years ago. Like, it should have clicked with her before then, but Sokka being surprised by it makes total sense.
Yeah.
He was like, this kid's a fucking idiot.
Oh, yeah. Sokka is not the brightest crayon in the box. He, as much as he claims to be a warrior, he's really not cut out for it at this moment in time.
Yeah, we'll actually get into that later.
Just because it seems like they mentioned that the men in the tribe actually went off to fight in the war. And I feel like that was detrimental to Sokka as a warrior, because he didn't really have that training that the actual warriors got. He had to learn everything on his own.
Something that I really like about the opening as well, actually, while we're still at the beginning of the episode, is they do a really good job of setting up this sense of desperation that the entire world is going through. Like, they straight up show like a village being burnt down. And like Katara mentions that her father and all of the men of the tribe left to go to war a couple years ago, which was brought on by events that we will get to later in the show. But yeah, I think the like it does a really good job of being like, hey, a lot of shit's at stake here with whatever happens.
There's a lot of shit at stake, and at the beginning of the episode, they're hopeless. They don't have the Avatar. They don't know that he's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's convinced that he went extinct along with the rest of the air nomads.
Oh, yeah. Also, something interesting. Again, it's the first and only alternate ending. Aang is not on the top of his opening. Yes. Why do I keep saying ending? The ending is the same.
Guys, don't listen to him. It doesn't end any differently in any other way.
It's still the chakra.
You will see at the end of the episode, there's no alternate ending. I don't even think there was an alternate ending on the DVDs. Personally, I never had the DVDs.
No, there wasn't. It's still the chakra. But in the alternate opening, Aang's not on his rock.
He's not on what?
Yeah, because in the normal opening, he's like on the rock holding his staff all heroic like, and she's like, I believe that Aang can save the world. But in this, Aang hadn't been revealed yet, so she just says, I believe the Avatar will return to save the world, and no one's standing on the rock.
I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah, that's a detail that, like, as a kid, I was like, holy shit!
Guy.
No, I was just like, because I rewatched The Boy in the Iceberg like 100 times. And I was like, hey, Aang's not on there. That's cool, because like he hasn't been shown yet.
I think the only time he was shown in the alternate was at the beginning, where she does the whole water, earth, fire, air.
Yeah. And we will get into this, but all four of those are... Those four characters might show up at some point. Because Aang was the airbender.
It definitely would make sense to use those characters. Not only from a story standpoint, because you're using them as like important figures of their elements.
Yeah.
The introduction, I feel like they should at some point come into the series.
Yeah, and also it's just a cool like little Easter egg, and it shows that certain things were like meant to be from the word go, instead of like being last minute additions. Also, fading into the episode, the music is actually slightly different than normal. In the normal opening, the music kind of like tapers off. And then like you hard cut into like the episode name. But in this one, it goes straight into like the amazing championing music goes through the title card, and fade to white into the camera panning over the icy ocean, and then zooming into Katara and Sokka's quiet little moment. And it goes from huge stakes, save the world, the music all ba 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 ba, real big, into a very quiet personal scene between Katara and Sokka, kind of setting up how the actual pacing of the show goes. Where it's
and I definitely feel like sound design is really important in this show.
Oh, for sure.
Specifically, they use a lot of different musical pieces to set moments.
Yeah.
Throughout the first couple episodes, and you know me, I'm a big music guy,
mm-hmm.
and I really think they hit the score spot on with this.
Also, on sound design, something I really appreciate, and we're gonna get into this in very specific episodes. Some people probably already know which episodes, but each element has its own sound, or at least like sound font, I guess. And it's really fucking cool. Like, if you're not even looking at the screen, you can tell what element is being used, and like it's so cool. But yeah, I do appreciate it immediately going from this big bombastic save the world vibe into two siblings fishing in a river. And it's like really quiet. Sokka even tells Katara to be quiet in it. And I think it's a really good way to set up for a first-time viewer how the pacing of the show usually goes. It's like, yes, the stakes are the world, but it's really about these characters and what they're doing at that moment. And that's what's more entertaining about the show than, save the world from angry firemen. Also, speaking of which, I really like how Sokka and Katara's. This is a very specific thing. How Sokka and Katara's names are introduced in this. They're not like, "Hi, my name's Sokka," really stilted. It's, "Shh, Katara, be quiet." And then when she gets the fish, it's, "Sokka, I got it." Like, I really appreciate that.
You do make a very good point. A lot of shows go out of their way, like, this is this person, and it really takes away from the moment. So I think having it as like this quiet moment where it's his brother and sister, and they're like, and he's just trying to fish, and she's like super excited, wanting to show her brother this thing. I think that's a good way to introduce characters.
Yeah,
and it kind of shows their relationship.
Yeah, and this show is really good about like very naturally introducing things to the viewer. There's never a moment where the only time I think they ever like, this is who this guy is with the show's main villain, which we'll get to later. But yeah, I don't know. I really appreciate, and I think it's a part of why the show is still celebrated. Ah, man, it's probably getting to like closer to 20 years than 10 years later, really. But yeah, I think that it's a huge part of why this show is so celebrated and why people love its writing so much, because everything feels natural. Nothing feels forced for the most part. Again, we'll get to that later.
And the writing does a really good job of achieving that natural flow rather than overexposing details, you know?
Yeah. Also, and I'm going to be pointing out a lot of like little baby details. Something another thing I really appreciated is when Katara is grabbing the fish. There's a little music cue when her face changes to show that like she has the idea to do something. This thing is really important. Hey, new viewer, you should be paying attention to this. And then it picks up when she pulls the fish out with the water, which shows that specifically what waterbending is. Hey, this person is controlling water from far away. And hey, she's using it to accomplish a task. There's a fish inside. She's using it to hold the fish in there. So you can use these bending styles to do like kind of intuitive things. I really like that.
So I honestly, there are certain musical cues that I actually did miss.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate it when I miss those because in a show like this, music is, like I said, very key in specific moments, showing things that are happening.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't. In the thing, you're not supposed to notice it, right? It's supposed to be in the background. Usually, if you're not looking for something and you notice it, in instances like this where it's supposed to be naturally teaching you how the world works, if you notice that it's teaching you a thing, it's probably doing it wrong. But this is the case where it did it right. You didn't notice because you weren't supposed to, really. The only reason I noticed it is because I in preparation for the podcast, I combed through it with like a fine comb.
I admit I rewatched it. I didn't go that specific into detail. I feel like I should have. It definitely would have given me a lot more viewpoints. But
yeah,
you know that's not my style, and we all understand that. So.
Also, real quick, to kill a joke, we're moving through this episode at a snail's pace. This is what we're here to do. To kind of kill the show's first real joke. But I think it's really cool analyzing how this show introduces a character's personality. A lot of Sokka's personality is in the joke where like he's over there fishing, about to send his spear down, when he doesn't realize that the fish swam under the boat and got picked up by Katara. And she's like, Sokka, I got it. And he's like, shh, you're gonna scare the fish away. And then that causes him to poke Katara's bubble, get himself wet, and let the fish escape. I like it. It shows their dynamic, kind of like Katara taking care of things while Sokka's like bumbling about in this early stage of his warrior's journey. And like he's easily irritated by bending and everything, and he doesn't really understand it. He calls it magic, which also really cool way of introducing things. Sokka points out that she's bad at playing with, quote, magic water, which it also shows us like, hey, Katara is not the greatest bender right now, which helps to set up her arc, but also gives her the option or the place to step in and say it's not magic, it's water bending.
Another expository thing
tells us the name of
super obvious in the moment.
Exactly, yeah, and it tells you, and it's something that, again, if I wasn't looking for it, I probably wouldn't have noticed it, but it tells you what the entire magic system is called. Like, hey, we've got a very specific name for our magic system. It's not magic. You can't just abracadabra and a thing happens. It's based on skill. It takes effort, which is why people can get exhausted, and that's the reason why they can't do it anymore. You're not pointing a wand at it and saying, please stop him from killing me real hard. I might have just made a dig at Harry Potter.
It's fine. I'll forgive you. I don't know if our audience will. I don't know. I'll forgive you on that one.
But yeah, it's like, hey, we have a hard magic system. It has a specific name, and it introduces that in such an elegant way. It's such a really cool way of doing it. Like, granted, a lot of other shows do this too. Like, Avatar's not necessarily special for this, but I think pointing out really cool things like this when it happens is important for analyzing stuff. And I'm going back through this, thinking about it from a first-time viewer's perspective, and thinking about how they introduce the world building to the viewer. I'm very impressed with just how how elegantly everything goes when you think about it. The world of Avatar is really fucking weird, and they make all of it seem normal.
And I'm still amazed at how they made combination animals seem normal.
Yeah. There's details about that we'll get into like a season and a half from now. But yes, I that's another thing. Like, and it's kind of a running joke in the fandom of like how like pretty much every animal is a combination with a different
Except
animal.
The fish. Somehow the fish managed to get away from it.
Yeah. Also, something interesting, and something that becomes very important in future seasons as well as future series is Sokka points out in a very elegant way, specifically saying, if I had weird powers, I would try to hide my weirdness or whatever, which tells us that not everyone is a bender, and specifically one of our main characters is not a bender. And that seems like something that would, like, oh, of course everyone can't do this, but it's the only reason it feels like an oh, of course thing is because of, again, how smoothly it's shown to the audience.
I had a thought on the whole Sokka's not a bender thing, but I need to save that for later on in the series. But we'll get to that.
Oh, gotcha.
Gotcha. But no, you make an excellent point. I am just going to constantly repeat what you say because you got a lot more information than I do. But no, it goes back to the same thing we've been saying. Exposition, but not super obvious exposition.
Yes, and this isn't necessarily an Avatar thing, but more just a writing thing in general. A lot of people hate on exposition, like in like, you know, your general like online review or whatever. People tend to like, oh, exposition is bad, I hate exposition, but I think that's a misunderstanding of it. Exposition is a tool that can be used poorly. It is an important tool. It is necessary. You can't have a story without exposition. Otherwise, you wouldn't realize what the fuck was going on. It'd be like if this show started with Aang winning the 100-Year War. Like, how the fuck did we get here? What is happening? It wouldn't be very good. It'd just be a fun, flashy fight scene. But you wouldn't understand what the fuck was going on, and it wouldn't be a good story. In Avatar, and basically every other good story, uses exposition really well in a way that, again, you don't notice that it's happening. If you notice exposition and you're not looking for it, they probably did it wrong. I'm saying probably because I know there's an exception that I'm not thinking of.
Well, and there's a lot of shows that, like, overdo the exposition. Not necessarily that they do it wrong, they just throw a lot of information at you once. And I feel like that's something this show did really well, was they didn't throw everything down your throat at one time. They gave you bits of information as the show went on.
Yes, actually, I have a note about that. And I'll get to it, probably repeat it here in a second, but they do a very good job of what I call drip feeding you the weirdness. They don't overexpose you with how fucking weird this show is. Because again, this world's weird. Kids can fly.
Kids can fly. Tiger seals are literal tiger seals.
Yeah.
It's just shit like that, and it's amazing to me how they just ease you into it instead of, hey, these things are these things. Fuck you.
No, yeah, for sure. I
probably just use, if we're trying to make a PG-13 podcast, I apologize. I just used our only F-bomb.
Dylan, you blew your load early as always.
Look, you don't have to call me out in front of everybody.
Moving along. So they get Katara and Sokka get caught in a very strong current, and they wind up their boat gets smushified, and they wind up stranded on a block of ice in the middle of the ocean. Probably very far away from where they live because they were on a fishing trip. They were probably planning on coming back with a lot of food. Especially with the way Water Tribe culture usually works, the men do the fishing. Sokka's the only one around. So he's probably one of the only people bringing in food. And because of a personal story with our main cast, I probably know why Katara was with him. We'll get into that when that episode comes up, though. But when they wind up there, Sokka says some rude things to Katara, and she goes the hell off. And by the way, it's really well animated. Her face gets real goofy in this, and I fucking love it. I used another F-bomb.
Well, we are officially R-rated stream. Sorry, guys. If you're under 17, you gotta go. Sorry.
Can't be here. Sorry. Avatar's for adults only. Everyone knows. You know how Nickelodeon is. But Katara's rant, actually, so we got a very low-level use of bending earlier with Katara catching the fish, and with Katara's rant, we get kind of a taste of what a more powerful bender can do, which shows us that Katara, while being an amateur right now, is capable of some crazy shit. She tears apart this giant glacier by accident. And after the dust settles, Katara's like, whoa, I did that? And Sokka's like, yeah, you did that. Can you please not do it again?
I mean, shit, if my sister did that, I'd be terrified too.
No, yeah. And the entire time, like, while he's being yelled at, he's, like, peeking around her, like, Katara! But also, so all the, moving on from that, Aang gets to wake up.
I love that you say gets to, also, like, he just wasn't allowed to in the beginning. It's not his fault. Okay, so this episode does kind of expose the fact that it is his fault, but we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's a flashback that shows him doing it.
I was gonna say it's not his fault, but it is. It 100% is.
But kinda. But actually, and this kind of ties into the trivia question from earlier. In a way, and I don't know if this was on purpose at all, in a way, Sokka and Katara both free Aang together. Because Katara does it, but she uses Sokka's weapon to do it. Which, I don't know if it was on purpose, but I think it's kind of cool how two parts of the original Team Avatar trio helped to free the third. That was a detail that, again, I don't know if it was on purpose, but if it wasn't, it's a very happy accident. But also, as Aang is waking up, the shit ton of ice he was under, plus all of Aang's Avatar glowy goo, and the different color, his different colored clothes, and the crazy giant fluffy animal that every other character in the show seems to be unfamiliar with, all kind of gives Aang this mystery factor. Like, what the hell is up with this kid? Which is really interesting and immediately makes the audience interested in what Aang is about. Also, this is where I put in my notes that Katara won the 100-Year War. Because if she didn't do that, Aang wouldn't have shown up. Everything would have been bad forever. Oh, by the way, Dylan, if you have anything to add, please interrupt me. Because otherwise I'm just going to, run on down my notes.
Well, like I said before, you had a lot more notes on this than I did at all. So I definitely feel like this episode is going to be a lot of you talking and me throwing in tangents that I see.
Mm-hmm. If you have any tangents, feel free to add them by all means. But yeah. Also, something that I think is really cool and kind of sets up again Sokka and Katara's characters really well is Sokka is very untrusting of Aang basically the entire episode, up until Aang saves them towards the end. But Katara, she feels like helping him isn't even an option. Like she'd never considered leaving and trying to find a way home. There's someone in there. I gotta break him free. Which is a consistent part of her character, as well as Sokka being generally untrusting of most people they run into. And it actually kind of feeds into his character arc a little bit. And from there, once he is freed and his glowy goo gets shot into the sky, and it makes some tiger seals very annoyed, we cut to our antagonist, Prince Zuko, who again is elegantly name dropped by his uncle, who isn't name dropped by Zuko, but he refers to him as Uncle, which right now is all we really need to know about Iroh. But Zuko has been searching for something for a long time, as he says, finally. And then it's like, hey, the thing I'm looking for is probably over there. And he then drops that it's the Avatar. Also, we get to reinforce the idea that they've been on the ocean for a very long time looking for the Avatar. Iroh says, we've been down this road before, and he specifically mentions that Aang's glowy shit is probably just the Northern Lights. We've done this before. We've followed leads that didn't lead us anywhere before. But Zuko was sure this time. It is the Avatar this time. And Iroh's like, nah, man, let's just play cards and drink tea.
God, even episode 1, Uncle Iroh's a legend.
Yeah, exactly. But it shows their dynamic really well immediately, because Zuko's being a hothead and not really listening to Iroh, but Iroh's like, nah, man, you should calm down. Like, this is getting crazy. And he gets told to calm down and drink calming tea, and Zuko firebends for the first time in the show and says, I don't need any calming tea! Which is a good sign that you're calm.
Of course. I'm always calm when I'm angry.
Oh, yeah, me too. I'm always calm when I'm angry. Transitioning back to our, the gang, if you will. G-A-A-N-G.
Of course.
The gang. So as they're trying to wake Aang up when he... Also, by the way, this is a tangent, but when I was a kid, when Aang's in the ice and like his eyes are open and all glowy and stuff, the shape of his head, I always thought he looked like a Martian in there. That's unrelated. But anyway, so he gets up on top of the ice, stands there all eerie-like, and then passes out, like a scary person.
Totally scary. Terrifying.
He slides down the ice, Katara catches him, and I'm pretty sure this again, I don't know if this was on purpose. It might have been, though, because it's a Nickelodeon show. Aang does a SpongeBob joke. So in the ripped pants episode of SpongeBob, right? So the scene where the lifeguard is like resuscitating him, and he's like, "Come closer, I need a tailor," because I ripped my pants. Aang does that in this. He does the like, come closer. Will you go penguin sledding with me? But I'm pretty sure that's a reference, and also it sets up Aang as this goofy kid. Which also, as I mentioned earlier, with the old man bending on top of the rock thing, might throw you off as to who the Avatar is. Because Aang, this weird orange arrow kid, doesn't look anything like that guy. And Katara just said he disappeared, so this might throw you off that trail a little bit. And also, Aang clearly isn't from here. Because, and it's really well done, because A, he got broken out of an iceberg. And B, Katara and Sokka are wearing blues and purples and, very cold colors. And Aang is wearing orange. He looks nothing like them. He's got a weird shaved head. He's got arrows. What is it? And everything he does seems to be unfamiliar. However, he's familiar with the idea of penguin sledding, which gives you the idea that, hey, this guy travels a lot. Which, again, really well done exposition. And this is where I put in my notes that the show does a really good job of drip feeding you this world's weirdness. As an example, they show you the weird bald orange kid, and let you get kind of used to him before they show you the giant fluffy arrow monster. They let you get used to Aang before showing you Appa, because Appa's really weird. He's like a weird otter bison thing with an arrow on his head that goes all the way back to his tail, and he's got 6 legs. Appa's weird.
You have a very good point there. They knew what they were doing, too.
No, yeah, because he's iconic as hell, too. Like, you see Appa, and you're not going to confuse him with anything else from anywhere else. He really is Avatar's Pikachu.
It's one of those, if you've never seen the show, you'll still know who/what Appa actually is.
Yeah. And, like, it's to the point where, like, I remember being a kid and, like, kids on the playground talking about flying bison. Like,
it was me. I was kids.
Not necessarily referencing. No, yeah. Even before I ended up moving closer to you, like, you know how kids will like try to like trick each other as a joke with like, hey, look, an X thing over there. I had a kid try to get with me with, hey, look, a flying bison. And, like, obviously that's an Avatar reference, and like a flying bison is a really weird concept for someone to remember that well, to just randomly use it for a stupid thing like that. So like I think Appa's really clear design in how much he looks like Aang, but not really, really played into like making Appa the Pikachu of Avatar. I almost said Appatar. But yeah, it does a really good job of just making him really iconic and really memorable, which I think was probably really important for the show. And we'll get into this later, but there's another thing that shows up in the show that represents a different side of Aang. Again, it just does a really good job of being really iconic. Which is something I actually think Korra kind of failed on. But that's... Korra's a long time from now. Also, a part of the drip feeding of weirdness again, Appa can fly, but Sokka doesn't believe him, which is normal. If I looked at Appa, I wouldn't be like, that thing can fly. You see all the wings and lightweightness that Appa's got going on?
He can fly. It's super obvious. You didn't notice?
This, 10 tons, not that heavy. And also, Sokka points out that Aang is weird. Again, the show is really fucking weird, and our what are now our two main characters not being used to Aang helps us feel kind of at home now that we're used to their weirdness.
And it's good that a character. It's always good to have a character who's like, "Hey, this is weird," because in shows like this, you don't often get that. You don't usually get characters that openly admit that something is fucking weird.
And also, like, so when Aang sneezes and, quote, flies 10 feet in the air, to Aang, that's not weird because he's an airbender, whatever, that happens all the time. But Sokka and Katara are blew away, and he's like, "Whoa, what's wrong?" And Sokka's like, "You sneezed and flew 10 feet in the air!"
And Aang's only reaction is like, "Really? It felt higher."
No, yeah, exactly. And Katara's like, "Whoa, wait, you're an airbender." Which is like, again, people think that, Katara mentioned in the opening, people think that the air nomads are extinct now. So, like, we get why that's special, but also reinforcing that, like, hey, this is what our magic system is called. Katara is a waterbender. Aang is an airbender. But telling it to the audience in this really natural way. And also, building off of the sneeze joke, I think this is another Nickelodeon reference. Sokka straight up gets slimed in this episode.
Yeah, because Appa's snot.
Yeah,
and on that note, Aang's just like, it'll wash out. It's fine.
No, yeah, because the slime is made to wash out. Although it doesn't, from reports that I've heard from people that have gotten slimed on Nickelodeon shows, it does not come out. But yeah, I think that's a really cool reference, because otherwise it'd be like, haha, snot joke, that's probably for little kids that are watching, whatever. But like the fact that it's on a Nickelodeon show, it like gets away with it. But also, airbending is unfamiliar. They introduced it through a sneeze. And it also, like, kind of gives you the idea that bending styles don't translate with each other. So, in the opening, Katara mentions that the quote is just, "The Avatar mastered all four elements." Not only the Avatar can master all four elements. So them thinking an airbender sneezing and going way up is weird kind of reinforces the fact that, okay, so maybe not everyone who is a bender can bend air. Not everyone who's a bender can bend water. Which I think is a really... because that is an important part of the show, the fact that bending doesn't cross streams, because the Avatars got to find teachers, and not anyone can teach them. But also just like the way that the different bending styles clash with each other, it would be a lot weaker if everyone could bend everything. So setting up that everyone can't bend everything early on is really important. Also, as Sokka and Katara realize that they don't have a way home, Aang is like, "Hey, Appa can fly us back to your village." And of course, Sokka doesn't believe her, and Katara's like, "Oh, I'd love a ride," and Sokka's immediately like, "I am not getting on that fluffy snot monster." Hard cut to him sitting on Appa because he had no other way home. And Yip Yip is set up for both a joke and an emotional payoff plus a drip feed of weirdness.
Because why wouldn't it be?
Because
at this point.
No, yeah. Again, everything in this episode is setting things up and preparing you for like how this world works. Aang says Appa Yip Yip, but he doesn't fly this time because he's tired. He's still waking up. It's been 100 damn years, but we don't know that yet. So Appa's still waking up, which is the excuse for why he doesn't immediately fly, and we aren't like, oh my god, this kid can sneeze himself 10 feet in the air, and cows can fly.
It's a very good drip feed. It's like morphine. It gets better over time.
No, yeah, exactly. Let's well, not exactly like morphine.
I don't know. The Last Airbender is a good painkiller, at least emotionally.
We'll get into that later. But yeah, like as things become normal, they become more liberal with how fast they show you them. But they're being very, very calm and really holding themselves back because there's some crazy shit that happens in the show. But yeah, while they're on their way back, the sun's starting to set. It's starting to get dark. And Katara starts up some conversation, and as a part of it, first off, Katara asks why Aang is smiling at her, and he's like, "Oh, I was smiling," which kind of sets up the whole crush thing.
Yeah, keep that in the back of your mind for later.
A thing. Yeah, that might be extremely fucking important later. But Katara asks, since Aang is an airbender, and with the Avatar cycle, he was supposed to be born. The Avatar was supposed to be born into the air nomads. Do you know what happened to him? And Aang says no, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, just thought I'd ask."
No, I knew people that knew him, but I didn't know it.
But I didn't know him. Yeah. Like him trying to make his lie believable, but as soon as she lays back to get some rest, he does the super obvious TV show thing of like, "Oh no, I messed up," as the camera zooms in, to really hammer in hey, he knows the Avatar, he's not saying something. And then Aang has a nightmare about being caught in a storm. He starts getting all glowy, and he creates the iceberg that he and Appa were stuck in.
Enter exposition of how that shit happened.
No, yeah, exactly, and it was kind of his fault. But we'll get more into that even later in another episode. For now, Aang wakes up from his nightmare as Katara is all like, "Hey, Aang!" And he's like, "Hey, we're in the Water Tribe now. You're good. Put some clothes on. We'll go outside."
I want to know who put him in bed, took his shirt off, all that. Was that Katara?
No, yeah, I feel like he might have just forgotten where he was. That's my headcanon. They got back all right. He was real tired and zonked out as soon as he got comfy. He's probably used to it at this point because, again, it kind of alluded to earlier from him not being around here, but knowing what penguin sledding is. He travels a lot, so he's probably used to this, just going into a weird place and going to sleep. But Katara notices his arrows for the first time,
which is odd. Because
really,
he's been bald the whole time. There's at least one visible at all times.
It's on his face.
How did you not notice that, homie?
The show is very clear that she's looking at his tattoos, that's weird. And then that reminds her, and she immediately goes to one of the, and I'll get to this later, but one of the best written characters in this entire two-parter. It's really impressive how well Gran is written, but Gran. She goes to her and is like, "Hey, this kid I think is an airbender," and Gran's like, "That's weird. No one's seen one in years. I thought they were extinct." Which, seen one in years is a bit of an understatement, but we'll get to that. But a really cool piece of not necessarily world building, but something that is an example of why I love bending as a magic system so much. So Aang is the only one who can use his glider. but it's given such a good in-universe reason. So we're introduced to it because the kid's like, oh, that's a cool staff you've got there. And because he's explaining it to a kid, he really dumps it down. He opens it up. He opens up the fans and is like, hey, I can control the air current around this while I'm hanging on to it, and I can fly. And that immediately tells us why no one else can pick up Aang's glider and fly with it, because to everyone else, it's just a hunk of metal, sticks, and paper. But to Aang, he can use his bending, a bending style that only he has, to fly with. It makes perfect sense. He's not the chosen one who was chosen by the glider or anything. You know, it's not Doctor Strange's cape. It's just a tool that he knows how to use. Which is really cool. And it also helps to give it sentimental value, which comes in later in the series.
So, when I first watched this, I didn't realize that Aang's staff was metal. I don't know why it didn't click. So when he did the whole thing,
it didn't click with me until recently.
He was showing off to the kids in the village, like, see, now my tongue stuck to my staff. I didn't realize that it was metal, and that's why. I was like, how is he doing that? Wait a minute.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think the only reason why they, like, tried to make sure everyone knew it was metal is because he hits a lot of shit with it in this show, and they wanted a reason as to why it wouldn't break. Because it is brown, like, it looks like wood. But also the fans are made of paper, so, like, whatever. Or I assume they're made of paper. I don't know what else they would be made of with how they look and how they're folded.
I mean, there are metal fans, and it's probably, like, the rungs between the fan, like, paper is metal, and the fan part itself is metal. Like the frame.
Yeah. Yeah, the frame, but like the fan, like the orange bit, I'm pretty sure is paper. Really thick paper, but paper. Katara mentions to Gran that, hey, this kid might be able to, like, teach me because he's a master bender. He might be able to teach me something, but Gran's like, hey, don't put all your trust in this boy. And like it's kind of like hammering in that, like, the older people in this village outside of Katara really don't trust people, and we'll find out why pretty soon. Speaking of teachers, amazing segue, Savart. Oh, I know. I'm great. I'm real cool. We see Iroh teaching Zuko, and he's teaching him firebending techniques, specifically a self-defense set of firebending, against some of the Fire Nation, what I call stormtroopers, because they're just in their like military attire that just so happens to make them faceless bad guys that can be knocked around by Aang.
Very, very obvious. Like, it's very obvious. It makes it very obvious that they are the bad guys. They are the Fire Nation, but they're just, like, there.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows that Iroh isn't just this wise old man. He is specifically, alongside being Zuko's uncle, he's also his teacher. He is specifically there to mentor him, to help him get, and to help guide him. And it's shown through him teaching him firebending, yes, but it helps ease us into the idea of him being a guide for Zuko in other areas. It helps us accept that more easily.
Well, and from the beginning, it seems like that's part of his character. He's trying to guide his nephew more than just as a teacher, but it's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this because I don't want you to be disappointed anymore if it's not who we think it is.
Yeah. Also, alongside getting this cool character moment for both Zuko and Iroh, we also get an in-depth tutorial on how firebending works, because it starts in the breath, and then and then that breath turns into energy, which extends past your limb and becomes fire. That's fucking cool. Like, they don't have to explain it in that much depth, but they chose to add world building to this character moment in a very natural way. And like, as a kid, I hung on to that. I was like, oh, that's cool that like I know how this shit works. And also, as in stark contrast to Iroh's introduction, where he was playing cards and drinking tea, while his kid was trying to find Jesus, literally. We see him being stern with Zuko now, being like, no, you need to run through that again. You messed it up. Your form was off. And Zuko overpowers him with his hot-headedness, because, get it, he's a firebender. I see what the show did by making the mean fire guy be angry all the time. I see what you did.
Like My Hero Academia as well? It's a common trope. Like, the fire dude's always going to be a hothead. But I do really like how that...
It's easy symbolism, and I see what they did there.
And it's more of an introspect into his personality specifically. It's not the trope for every firebender that we see in this episode. Because you see Iroh, he's not hot-headed. He's really calm. He's usually he's playing tiles in the beginning. And, you know, it's not to say that every fire character is, but it's definitely an introspect into Zuko's personality, and he does give a glimpse in this episode to his backstory. He's just a boy who wants to go home.
Yeah.
And the only way he can go home is by finding Jesus. Praise God, alhamdulillah.
And also something interesting I think about Zuko's character is he is able to convince Iroh just by being stubborn. Like, that's how stubborn and hot-headed he is. Like, this wise old man can be swayed just by, like, no, teach it to me. And he specifically points out that, like, he does have reasoning for it, but it's still, like, through, like, anger and stubbornness, because the Avatar must be over 100 years old by now, and he's had plenty of time to master all four elements. Again, hammering that in, the fact that, hey, he can do this thing that's real special. I have to be able to, I'm gonna need more than basic firebending in order to beat him and take him home.
That kind of shows the ignorance of all the other characters. Not necessarily ignorance, but it shows like how the world is convinced he's gone. But at the same time,
that like, too.
He holds on to it, where everybody else is like, you're never gonna find him, because that's his only way of restoring his honor, going home. So it kind of makes me feel for Zuko in the beginning. Even though he's the bad guy, he's not actually a bad kid.
No, yeah. But that's getting into future episodes that we
we're not spoiling the episode. I am talking here and now. Like, you can tell just by him explaining his backstory, at least a little bit that we get, that saying that the Avatar is the only way he can go home. Like, he's not doing this for any nefarious reasons. He just wants to go home. And from the first episode, I kind of feel for Zuko, thinking back on it.
Yeah. And basically, what you said is a very good way of putting it. We kind of start to understand. It does kind of start to not understand, but kind of foretell how. I'm going to use the word desperate a lot in this episode probably. But it kind of shows how desperate he is, that like he's looking for someone who's over 100 years old. This person's probably dead, dude. Like, we're in a world that clearly doesn't have modern medicine yet. Like, they're not around anymore.
I'm like, I mean, come on. We've already met the entire South Pole Southern Water Tribe. There's not many people there. Obviously, that's a problem. So, and like, you don't find out about any kind of medications that they have leading into, yeah, these people don't have medicine like you would in the modern time.
Yeah, and cutting back to the Southern Water Tribe, Aang has like the slide set up on Appa, using the staff to hold up Appa's tail, and he's letting kids like slide down it and stuff, and everyone's having a grand old time. And Sokka walks up, and he's being very stern with the kids, which again gives a sense of desperation to the world. Sokka, a 16-year-old boy, has to be stern with little kids because they're the only men of the village. And with how their culture works, they're the protectors. They're the ones tasked with having to protect a village when the oldest one is 16.
It really puts into perspective how desperate the world was.
Yes, exactly. And it does a really good job of being like, yeah, the Fire Nations have been shitting all over us, like, and we're the water guys.
Yeah, it's fun to think about that. Just like, you've got a whole village of water, surrounded by water and ice, and still the Fire Nation was so strong that they easily defeated the Southern Water Tribe, to the point where they were like, no, we have to send all of our men to the front lines to fight this war.
Yeah, and leave a teenager and literal children who, when they left, were probably toddlers. They're the ones that gotta protect it. Sorry, we gotta go.
It was either desperation or like, look, we really don't think they're gonna come back here again.
Yeah. Also, something, while Sokka's going off, Aang says, "What war?" Aang doesn't know about this war that's been plaguing the entire world for 100 years.
Allusion to time.
Yeah. Anyway, this, and Sokka says, he's kidding, right? And then Aang, before Aang can answer, he immediately gets distracted by a penguin.
It's another thing that shows, like, he's just a kid. It feels like in the beginning, like, with all their hope of him being the Avatar before the big reveal, like, it still feels like they're expecting too much of him because he is still a kid.
No, yeah. And also, it's in character for other reasons I'll get into later that Aang talks about at the end of the episode. But yeah, it's a really good character moment for Aang. And also, it helps us get out of that scene and into the next one, where Katara said she was going to go penguin sledding with him, so she walks up, and Aang's having issues. Catching
the penguins.
Catching penguins. Yeah, thank you. He's having issues catching one, and Katara pulls out a fish and teaches him how to catch penguins. Which, not gonna get into it, but that's real fucking clever, having one of their first interactions while they're alone be her teaching him something. That's I see what you did there. That's a smart one. And they get into, anyway, while they're there and they're alone, Katara asks Aang just straight up, hey, you're a master bender. I'm really not. can you teach me waterbending? And Aang's like, okay, but you're a waterbender and I'm an airbender. Those things don't really, it doesn't work like that. Which again helps us set up, helps to like drill in, like, hey, benders of one element can't bend another, and they don't really get how the other elements work. But he's like, hey, the North Pole probably has got waterbenders, and yeah, that's far away. It's literally the other side of the planet. But I've got a flying bison. I can take you there, and bam, you've got a story premise. We'll get more of that in a little bit. But yeah, the Katara teaches him how to catch penguins. Again, important that she taught him a thing.
Now he owes her.
Well, not only that, like Katara teaching Aang comes back in the show. Also, secretly, like one of the saddest lines in the entire show, while they're penguin sledding, and this is some real like 11th grade English teacher analyzing poetry from me. But Katara says, I haven't done this since I was a kid while penguin sledding because the war stole her childhood from her. She's like, what, 13, 14 at the oldest? And she doesn't see herself as a kid anymore. Because she's been at war. She's been helping mother children. She's been... Later we learn that she's helped deliver a baby before. Like, she's had to stop being a girl and start acting like a woman. And Aang reminds her that she still is a kid because Aang represents hope. That is something that I did not see before I was looking for stuff in this episode, but I'm pretty sure that's what the symbolism is supposed to be. Katara in the world have lost hope. They've lost the ability for kids to be kids. And Aang represents peace and hope coming back. And that's not only in this episode, that is something that is, like, has much less subtle symbolism in later parts of the show.
To be fair, like, later parts of the show are definitely more focused on the mission at hand. But, like, this is setting up their characters, and it shows, like, she has been forced to grow up. She didn't really get that childhood like everybody else did.
Yeah.
And while Aang, he got more of a childhood, so he...
Yeah. And it's a throwaway line, but it's one that carries so much weight with it that I didn't notice until, like, again, like, taking that fine-tooth comb and going back through the episode.
Like, I noticed it. On these new watch-throughs before we started this podcast, I did notice that. I was like, you know, that's kind of sad. She's basically the caretaker for everyone in the village. Because Gram's old. She can't take care of her like she used to. So that, in turn, falls onto Katara's shoulders, which I feel like isn't fair because there are definitely older women in the village that are shown in certain scenes.
But, like, there's not a lot, and there's a lot of kids in that village. Most of the people in that village are children. Like, Katara is one of the oldest people who isn't literally an elder.
And it's a very depressing thought that all of this stuff kind of falls to her and in turn to Sokka because, you know, this is all they have.
Yeah. And also, like, Katara and Sokka's only caretaker other than Katara was Gran because it's also mentioned in this episode. I forget when. I forgot to put that in my notes. That big deal. But while their dad is off at war, their mom's dead.
Yeah, it is a very big detail. I am surprised that you didn't have it written down, because that is definitely something I would expect from you.
I'm talking about the symbolism of I haven't done this since I was a kid, but forgot to put down
Forgot
that her mom's
put down
dead.
the reason why she hasn't been to doing it since she was a kid.
Yeah, or the reason why she doesn't see herself as a kid anymore, despite the fact that she's 14 years old.
And that's something you see throughout
really
this episode a lot, is kids being forced to grow up because of the circumstances of war.
Yeah. And the show does a really good job of showing off. We'll get into this in later episodes for the 1000th time.
I promise you guys, we will get to these things. We just don't want to give away too much in the beginning.
No, yeah. Again, like, for people that are watching the show for the first time who are listening to the podcast, we don't want to spoil things. So if this is torture for some of you who have seen it as many times as I have, I apologize. But we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, anyway, at the end of their ride, they come to a large Fire Navy ship, and Aang doesn't even know what it is. Aang is confused when he sees it, and Aang is not Katara's name. Katara says that it's a very bad memory for her people. And that is something that we'll dive deeper into later. But just that line plus the Metroid vibes once they're inside the ship helps to sell how different and scary the Fire Nation's tech is, because the Fire Nation, they're running on steam power, but which is very low tech to us, and even back in the early 2000s when this was first shown, super low tech to like the real world, but is super advanced to everyone else. And like the music and atmosphere and the weird Dutch angles when they're inside the ship really help to sell that.
Okay, for those of us who don't know film theory, explain what Dutch angles are, because I'm lost.
Oh yeah, sorry. So a Dutch angle is literally just like, so you know the angle that everything is normally shot at, where like down is down. With a Dutch angle, down is diagonal.
Huh.
So like the camera's tilted.
Makes sense.
And it's a technique that is done to help things feel uneasy.
Which is definitely good for
because
this point
your balance is off. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Because they're walking through a ghost ship from the bad guys. And Katara basically explains that, like, this is one of the only real remnants of the war that exists around the Southern Water Tribe, and it's a constant reminder of, like, what's going on for everyone. And really, kids aren't even allowed to go in there because it's real scary, because it might be booby-trapped. And Aang is kerfuffled. He's like, I've been all around the world. I've never seen any instance of a war. And Katara's like, how long have you been in that iceberg? And he's like, maybe a couple days, a few weeks maybe. And Katara's the one to be like, it might have been 100 years. And of course, Aang's like, that's freaking possible. I'm not 112 years old.
He literally says, look at me. Do I look like a 112-year-old man to you?
No, yeah. And she's like, well, think about it. You don't know shit. We don't know shit about you. The Airbenders have been gone 100 years. You're here. You don't know about the war that's been going on for 100 years, despite being 12. I think you were in there for a real long time, buddy. And Aang is beside himself.
Flabbergasted.
He is kerplunketized.
And as would be expected, if somebody told me I was 100 years old and I thought I was just asleep for a couple of days, I'd be out of my wits too. I'd be absolutely confused. Like that's not possible.
No, yeah, and he's like really upset about it too. He's like, man, I've got friends and stuff, and they're probably not around anymore because 100 years is real long.
Yeah, 100 years is a long time. I don't know if you know that, but
and then they trigger a booby trap. A Fire Nation flare gets set off. Zuko knows where Aang and Katara are. He points out that he's real spry for an old man, kind of pointing out that like he doesn't realize how old Aang is because he's looking through a spyglass. And we get a to be continued right into part 2, The Avatar Return.
So I feel like before we start part 2, I definitely need a break.
Okay.
At least to utilize the latrine.
Oh yeah, for sure. We will be right back, everyone. All right, we are back.
Welcome back. I felt like after about an hour and a half, you guys, any of you still watching, were probably getting tired of hearing us go super in depth. So I figured a 5-minute break wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, for sure. I should have thought about that. I'll try to work that into times in the future when I'm hosting. But yeah, we're back from our break. For the YouTube audience, it'll be immediate thanks to the power of editing.
And now we can hop back into The Avatar Returns, part 2 of the first 2 episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you missed the first half of the stream, we talked a lot about the symbolism of basic as it shows the desperation of the world, how kids are being forced to take on adult roles because of the war, and sort of Aang's obliviousness to it all because, again, he's been trapped in the iceberg. But now we're going to get into the Avatar
basically, everything
and
that the first half was setting up kind of pays off here.
We actually finally get an interaction between the main antagonist and the gang.
As it were, yes, the gang. So we get the first instance of the real opening to the show. This
one sticks with us through the entire series, with later changes, as you will see as we move on, as you watch it with us.
Actually, really, I don't think the main opening changes at all.
So there are minor changes in the elementals in the beginning.
Oh, really? When we get to that, you'll probably have to tell me about that because I don't know what that is.
When we get to that, if you don't pick up on it, I will definitely point it out. I don't know when it happens, but I know it does happen. But we will get to that at a later date.
But yeah, the main differences in this opening is in this version of the opening is it's much shorter, more concise because the writers are hoping you get it at this point that everything is sad.
Aang is on his rock.
Yeah, Aang's on the rock.
Aang's on the rock.
But yeah, Katara name drops him even. She mentions that 100 years later, my brother and I found the new avatar, an airbender named Aang. And though his airbending skills are great, he's got a lot to learn before he's good to do good. And then he smacks
exactly how the intro goes.
And then he smacks into a rock of a very important animal that we'll get to it later. It's called a lion turtle. That's all you need to know. But just so people know, yes, lion turtles have been around since episode 1. But yeah, we cut right to Avatar and Korra. No, that's not either of their names. Aang and Katara.
I mean, you were half right.
Kind of. The Avatar and a waterbender.
Anyway, we do get a cut to Avatar and... You got me doing it. So we do get a cut to Aang and Katara back in the abandoned ship.
Well, no, actually, it's them walking back to the Water Tribe with the flare in the sky behind them.
Oh yeah.
Showing exactly what they did, and the entire village is waiting for their return.
And Aang drops one of my favorite lines. We kind of boobied into it.
No, yeah, there were some booby traps, and we kind of boobied right into it.
That's one of my favorite lines in the entire series.
It's a good one. And we get to see exactly why. Specifically, Sokka and Gran Gran have been so slow to trust Aang, and it's really reinforced when they come back. Like they're immediately like, "Hey, it's been hammered into everyone never to go into that ship. You knew you shouldn't have gone in there. Aang's clearly a traitor. Why else would he have set it off? Like, you know, why wouldn't Aang know what the Fire Nation's about? Because they don't know that he's been frozen for 100 years. Aang is banished from the village because even if he's not on the side of the Firebenders, he's still shown himself to be dangerous. He collapsed Sokka's watchtower, and now he's signaled the Fire Nation. If anyone's nearby, they're gonna come a running.
Of course, the bright blue light in the beginning of the show didn't tell anybody at all what was going on.
But still, it's the principle of it all.
Yeah. They don't know at this point that it was a trap, that they just stumbled into it.
Also,
so he has to assume that he set it off on purpose.
Also, I'm not gonna call back to this for a while, but Sokka. So when Katara mentions that, you know, Aang's brought back something to the village that they haven't had in a long time, fun. Sokka mentions that you can't fight firebenders with fun, and Aang says you should try it sometime, and that's all I'm gonna say until like the end of the show, but it comes back.
I don't know. I feel like it's actually brought up in this episode that he does fight them with fun in a way.
To an extent, and I think I know what you're talking about, but we will get there when we get there. Anyway, there's a big kerfuffle. There's a little bit of an argument that is had. Heated words are said. Katara says that, well, if Aang's banished, I am too. Takes his hand and starts marching towards Appa. Like, Aang's taking me to the southern water tribe. That's where they are. Aang's taking me to the northern water tribe, and we're gonna learn waterbending together. No, I'm gonna learn waterbending, not together. She doesn't know he's the Avatar. Somehow.
You would think she would be the first one to figure it out.
Yeah. With everything. She figured out he's been asleep for 100 years. Who else went missing 100 years ago? Huh.
As smart as Katara is, I feel like that was one of her dumbest moments.
Yeah. Anyway, anyway, when Katara says that, Aang's like, I am doing that, sweet. Like, he's just like, sure, let's do it. Who cares? You can go missing and go to the North Pole. That's dope. When Sokka brings up that, hey, that might not be the best move, Aang does agree with Sokka. He's like, hey, you should stay here. This is your home. You got shit to do here. Like, that might be a little irresponsible. And then mentions a line that I'm pretty sure was thrown in there just to help make Aang more relatable to kids. He says, I haven't cleaned my room in 100 years. I'm not looking forward to that. And I'm here to say that line worked on me.
Yeah.
Also, the sadness of Aang leaving is super sold by this little girl with puppy dog eyes. She's like, Aang, don't go. I'll miss you. Like, really sad. And then it cuts right to Katara, like, being like, yeah, me too, but, like, silently with her hair loopies flowing in the wind all sadly. Even her hair loopies are sad. Also, there's a little bit of, like, character building with Aang once he's, like, hanging out in his ice donut. Where Appa just kind of, like, he just kind of real quick. And either Aang can understand Appa or he's projecting onto him, one or the other. But he says, yeah, I liked her too. And it helps to show how close Appa and Aang are, because regardless of if Appa was trying to say that or if he was just making a noise because he's an animal, like, it helps to show that they have a bond, and, like, Aang will, like, talk to him. And Appa's definitely more than just a pet or a car to Aang. And it helps to show, like, hey, Appa's actually going to be a character in this show, which sets up for something that I will not spoil. Also, cut right to the epic scene of both Sokka and Zuko gearing up for war. It's really cool and sets up for their epic showdown.
I could feel the air quotes in that.
Anyway, as the ship is coming in, they do a good job with this. It's scary. Which also helps set up for other things in the future. But, like, this ship is terrifying as it's coming in. It dwarfs the village. It plows through the ice. Sokka's sitting there, club in hand, ready to swing at a ship, I guess. But even he's, like, fucking terrified as the shadow looms over him, breaking through the ice, breaking through the protective wall of the village, turning it to snow. Or it already was snow, but making it all powdery and shit. The ship door opens, and you hear the awesome Fire Nation motif. I explained a bit of film theory. Now to explain something I actually know something about: music theory. A leitmotif is basically a musical idea that is repeated a lot throughout a piece of media. So, for example, the Fire Nation motif is the ba 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 ba. You'll hear it all the time. It represents the Fire Nation. And it's real scary. It's super cool. It's got this, like, technical feel to it, which is super out of place in this world. Which, again, it helps make it scary. Because it's just out of place. It doesn't feel like it belongs. And the not so epic showdown of Sokka having his club kicked off to the side and then being thrown off the ship with another real easy looking kick. How dangerous the Fire Nation as a whole, but specifically Prince Zuko can be, is immediately told to us, because Sokka probably just taught himself how to hit stuff outside of, like, wrestling with his dad. But Zuko is a trained martial artist. Like, bending, a part of the magic system is that it's a martial art that you are trained in. Of course, Zuko's going to wipe the floor with Sokka, despite them being the same age and probably relatively similar in strength. Because they're both 16, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
And despite being immediately having from his head to his waist buried in snow head first, by one kick, Sokka gets back up. He doesn't let up. As soon as Zuko starts threatening the village, he gets back up and starts swinging. But in that, there is something I did want to talk about, or another thing. Allow me to interrupt myself. He pulls out Gran and says, he's probably this old, and he's the master of all four elements. And everyone's real confused, because they haven't seen anyone that matches that description, not even close. But also, if he thought Aang would have looked something like Gran, Why didn't he think Gran was the Avatar?
Well, I assume he knew that. I assume he knew that the Avatar was an Airbender. He probably wouldn't be looking like everybody else there.
But if the Avatar, because earlier in part 1, he mentions that he's had 100 years of hiding rather. If he really thinks the Avatar is a coward, wouldn't the Avatar dress up like the people that they're hiding with? Like, there are tons of female avatars. And anyway, small, minor plot hole, not that big a deal. Just something I noticed. Because Gran matches the description. The only thing she's not doing is bending. And maybe it's because she looks frail, and like obviously the Avatar is a master of 4 different martial arts styles, but like it's 100 years. That's plenty of time for someone to get decrepit. Anyway, Sokka's trying real hard to protect the village. It's not working. And something cool that happens is one of the kids throws him a staff and is like, "Show no fear." And like,
which is adorable.
No, yeah, it's adorable, but it also shows like, despite the fact that Zuko's being absolutely stunted on in this scene, his village still believes in him, which kind of shows that he has potential. He's not a great warrior yet, but he has the potential to become one. Just putting little character arcs in there at the very beginning. I love it. Anyway, Aang shows up, knocks Zuko on his... Well, not on his ass, because his helmet gets knocked on his ass. But he shows up, and, he starts fighting Zuko, and Zuko's like, wait, this kid's an Avatar, and there's that scene that was in all of the commercials. You're the Avatar? Well, you're just a teenager. I don't know why I remember that commercial so well. But it breaks the tension, tells everyone just plain out, Aang's the Avatar, and Katara's surprised for some reason, but Sokka's surprised for a good reason, because he didn't trust Aang. He thought Aang was just some stupid-ass kid. He didn't know Aang was in the iceberg for 100 years. But yeah, like...
Sokka's reactions are basically everybody else's reactions.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Sokka... Katara is the viewers who didn't catch onto it, and Sokka is everyone else.
Yeah.
But with that, it's revealed that, again, Aang lied. But why would he lie? He obviously he feels some sense of responsibility because he came back, but why would he lie about being the Avatar? That's a really important thing to lie about. And as he's being dragged away, Katara's like, no, like, Aang, you don't have to do this. And Aang's like, hey, don't worry, it'll be okay. And it seems like he's just trying to make her feel better, but he was planning some shenanigans. Also, after this scene, Zuko says, plot a course for the Fire Nation. We're going home. Which is just real cool. Also, as someone who's in the military, I completely understand how all those firebenders feel. But anyway, something that I really like is that after the ship leaves, we get to see everyone cleaning up afterwards. Again, we mentioned earlier this show being really good about showing the effects of war. But this is a keen example of it. We don't just cut to Sokka and Katara talking about saving Aang. We cut to people cleaning up snow, putting things back together, putting their tents that they live in back together. Like, in the fact that they take the time in a show that they have limited time per episode. The fact that they take time to show, like, even in a small example like that where no one got hurt, war sucks. War hurts people. Damage was done. They have to, and the victims are the ones that have to clean it back up and rebuild. Even from just something as simple as a ship showing up. Also, the crack in the ice that Katara is standing next to as she's watching the ship go away, until like today when I was rewatching the episode, I thought she was just by some random stream that led into the ice to clear her thoughts about, thinking about how sad she was about Aang. No, that was the crack that Zuko's ship made. She was watching him leave. That's real sad.
I didn't notice that.
No, yeah. I didn't until today. Anyway, Sokka shows up with his boat, and he symbolizes, like, everyone understands everything with Aang now. He was the Avatar. That's why he was so weird. He saved us, again, A, he saved us. B, he's surrogate Jesus. And even Gran, who's obviously going to be the most jaded. She's seen basically the entire war. She's the most jaded to newcomers. She shows up and is like, hey, I was wrong. You got... Sokka's like, hey, we should go save your boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend, because they're kids. And Gran shows up and is like, hey, yeah, you're going to need your sleeping bags. Go get that kid. Blah, blah, blah. Your destinies are intertwined. And by the way, I mentioned that I thought Gran was important earlier. This is why. Gran, when you think about it, is barely even a character in this show. And she's still given a well-rounded personality. We understand that she's jaded because she's been living through war. But we also get
her entire life.
Yeah, but we also get to see this lighter side to her, and her caring for her grandkids and all this. They didn't have to include any of that. But they did. They chose to make Gran a well-rounded character, someone who shows up once and then gets a couple references. I don't know. I just think that's really cool. Anyway, cut to the ship. Zuko's flaunting his Avatar trophy around. He's like, take him to the brig. And he gives Iroh Aang's staff. He's like, hey, can you bring this to my quarters? I want to keep this as a trophy. And Iroh's like, oh, sure. And as soon as Zuko leaves, he gives the staff to a random stormtrooper firebender. And is like, hey, would you mind taking this to his quarters for me? I'm going to go.
So I want to jump back for a second.
Yeah.
I noticed this after I watched this episode again. Notice before they take Aang, he says, watch Appa until I get back.
Oh, yeah, he does.
So, obviously, he already has some sort of plan, like, I'm going to get out of this, I just have to figure it out.
Yeah, I didn't think to bring that up, but yeah, he's planning some shenanigans.
He already knows he's going to be able to escape.
Yeah.
And that's further pushed in this scene when he's being led to the cell. Now that we're getting to that,
yeah,
where he's like, "I bet you guys have never fought an airbender before."
Yeah,
he has this knowledge.
Yeah, and he even says, "I could probably take both of you with my hands tied behind my back." As his hands are tied behind his back, and the guard's just like, "Quiet." But yeah, and actually, I didn't think to include that in my notes, but yeah, that's another thing where to everyone else, they probably just thought, hey, he's trying to make us feel better. He watch Appa for me until I get back. They probably just saw that as, this kid's really fucking weird. I don't know, man. You're probably not coming back. You're clearly a glass half full kind of guy, but you're not coming back. Those are firebenders. They're dangerous. But yeah. Also, I counted. And I'm going to continue counting throughout the series, but from the looks of it, including the crewmen, including the helmsman, but not including, so without Zuko and Iroh, it looks like Zuko has 7 crewmen, including the helmsman, and I am going to be keeping track of that, and for forever, basically, until it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, that's a good thing to notice, because you got to think these guys want to go home just as much as he does.
But also, but like 7 doesn't seem like that many, right?
It's not that many, but does that mean they were exiled too, or?
Well, no, they weren't exiled. They're like, because we'll get there when we get there. Because
I honestly don't remember that part. I can't wait to get to that episode to find out.
Oh yeah, it's arguably the best episode of the first season. But again, we'll get there when we get there. Also, getting to Aang's shenanigans, which we were alluding to earlier, they actually show us some airbending abilities. First is one that was alluded to with the sneeze, with his like crazy breath, or whatever you want to call it, where he just kind of blows on the guy in front of him, sends him crashing into the door and wall in front of him, and knocking both Aang and the guard behind him into the back, all the way back to the end of the hallway. It's just crazy breath, I guess. That's what I'm calling it now. Then he does a real big jump to get out of there. So that's 2 different, like, solid airbending abilities that you might, that are kind of intuitive, but you wouldn't think of right away. To kind of, like, you know, trapping the water, the fish in water earlier, kind of gives the idea that, like, you can do intuitive things with bending, which is something that comes back later in the show. But another one is he kicks, and he does a gust of wind that opens a door for him while his hands are tied, and then he like super speed runs around a couple guys to get around him, and also the way he breaks out of his binds is really fucking cool. He like, so like the dude throws fire at him, and he does like a front flip that and he times it, goes over the like beam of fire and times it just right so that he uses the dude's like horn on his helmet to cut the rope. That's so goddamn cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, cut back to Sokka and Katara. They're on Appa. They're about to go save the boy. Saving the boy in the iceberg. And Sokka's being all sarcastic. And a side note about that, a mutual friend of me and Dylan's, I was introducing her to the show back when we were kids, and when Sokka's being sarcastic, like, fly, soar, jump, Katara interrupts Sokka and says, please, Appa, but our friend, who I will not name, thought he was saying leap, and me and her, we thought that was real funny for a while. Like, fly, soar, jump, leap! Anyway,
do something. Anyway.
Yeah. Sokka accidentally is like, what was it that kid said? Yeehaw, wahoo, yip.
Yip.
And Appa's like, this is my time. And triggers.
Appa, that's the point where Appa just goes ham.
Yeah. And it triggers that emotional payoff and drip feed of weirdness that I was talking about earlier. So it both shows, hey, yes, Appa can fly, which again it's an emotional payoff for what was mentioned earlier with its own big music and everything, but also like, yeah, cows can fly. They don't have wings. He kind of flaps his tail a little bit, but it's not really explained.
I still haven't figured out how that works.
There's a semi-explanation way later in the series, but we'll get there when we get there.
It's not important right now. We just need to know the cow can fly.
Yeah, anyway, cut back to Aang stunting on some firebenders. Aang
takes go hard or go home really, really seriously.
He goes hard to go home.
Yeah.
So he's looking for his staff. He opens a couple doors. He's like, "Hey, have you seen my staff?" And it's Iroh snoring. And he's like, "Sorry." And then he gets to the place where his staff is, and he sees it. And it turns out that Zuko is just really good at hunting down the Avatar. Contrary to what Iroh thought at the beginning of the episode, he's real good at this. Because he used Aang's staff as a lure. And then as soon as Aang walks in the room, he closes the door and is like, "I gotcha. I underestimated you once before, but I'm not going to do that again." And little did Zuko know, Aang's not stuck in there with him. He's stuck in there with Aang.
Oh, yeah.
Because Zuko...
Like, Aang's one of those characters you wouldn't think he'd be able to fight as well as he does, just because he's only 12.
Yeah, but those arrows, they mean something. He didn't get them for graduating airbending kindergarten.
Yeah.
He actually, we'll get to this later, but for a while, for a very long time, Aang is the youngest person in the world's history to get those arrows, and he got them at the age of 12. We'll cover when that record was broken in a very long time. Anyway, Zuko's fighting with raw Angry Boy power. Angry Boy spelled with an I.
It's like angsty.
Yeah. But he's defeated just by Aang being clever. So Zuko's hot-headed stubbornness gets him real far, but Aang can edge him out just by being clever, being crafty, and using his brainy brain like an airbender. He does things like he uses his the first on-screen air scooter to ride around the room and deftly dodge fireballs. And it also allows him to survey the room, get used to his surroundings, so he can start using them. And as soon as he's got a feel for the room, he hops off the air scooter, grabs one of Zuko's banners, uses it to tie him up, and as soon as he gets free, him tying Zuko up gives him time to grab his staff. As soon as he's free, he positions Zuko on top by the mattress, uses airbending with his staff to slap the mattress and Zuko against the wall, and then do it one more time onto the ceiling, and then run out. Aang's running out of the hallways. He jumps before jumping off the balcony, he sends his glider in front of him, which is real big I'm free vibes. And as soon as he jumps onto the glider, we see from behind him Zuko leaping, grabbing Aang by the ankle, and hanging on for dear life.
God bless you, Zuko.
Yeah, he's determined to grab Aang, and they both go crashing onto the deck of the ship. Aang's surrounded by fireballs, but Appa, Sokka, and Katara showed up, but maybe too late. Because Aang's already surrounded, and Zuko's hitting him with fireballs, and Aang's blocking him with his staff, but just barely, and his staff gets knocked out of his hands. Aang gets thrown overboard, and then it happens.
You hear that tone in his voice. This is how epic that fight is.
Oh yeah. The Avatar state is finally shown off after being teased twice. Katara goes, "Aang! Aang!" And we go underwater with Aang, and you can barely hear it. And then there's just one real loud Aang! And then he opens his real grumpy, glowy eyes, and he goes back onto the deck, and it's basically a screen wipe. If you don't know video game terms, a screen wipe is where everything on the screen gets wiped.
Everything's gone.
All of the firebenders are immediately thrown off the ship. Happy ending. Everyone's doing cool. Appa and the rest of the gang all get, all get onto the ship. They're like, Aang, I thought you were gonna fucking die. And he's like, nah, I'm really good at not dying. You should have seen me in the iceberg. Also, actually, we'll get to that note here in a bit. So Zuko gets this real cool jump scare. That's actually like kind of really effective. Where Sokka's like, "Oh, I'll grab your staff for you, Aang." And Zuko grabs it because I guess he grabbed onto the anchor despite being launched 6 feet away from the ship. And Sokka like bonks him off, and he's like, has his first like Water Tribe pride moment, which kind of becomes a thing for him. He's like, "That's from the Water Tribe."
Sokka gets his proud moment.
Yeah, and then Katara gets her big moment where she actually stops firebenders using waterbenders, but in a way that shows us that she still has a long way to go, because the first time she does it, she accidentally sends the water behind her and freezes Sokka in place, which teaches us that waterbenders can freeze water at will. It's actually pretty easy for them, because Katara does it, even though she accidentally sends the ice behind her. But then she turns around and freezes the firebenders in place as they're like slowly marching towards her for some reason. But it's
that single skill is very important.
Yes.
Throughout the entire series.
Yes, it is.
Not because she does it often, which I won't say. But
it comes shows, up and it becomes a.
It shows to what extent benders can control their surroundings.
Yes, exactly. And like I said before, it kind of beats in that idea of bending being intuitive. Like things that you don't think of immediately, but like kind of make sense, are all possible. All of it. You're thinking, for people who aren't versed in the show, if you're thinking of a thing right now that a bender might be able to do, they can probably do it. And it's real fucking cool. Anyway, she stops the fire. It also shows that she's willing to fight. If things get bad, she's willing to step up and put up her dukes.
Just in these first 2 episodes, Katara has shown a lot of character growth.
No, not even character. I wouldn't necessarily say character growth, but definitely like a lot of character. Like these 3 have been. We immediately understand everything about them. Just after, I mean, the way it aired, the first episode, really. Like these episodes were aired back to back. I don't even think they had an intro breaking them up when they first aired. Like right away, like before the credits roll, we know who these characters are and what they're about. And getting more into that, even after Sokka, Katara, and Aang are flying off into the sunset, Zuko's still not done. He and Iroh both send a fireball careening towards them. It's a real big boy fireball, too. It took 2 firebenders, 2 whole firebenders. And Aang, like, knocks it into the side of the glacier thing they were sailing next to. It causes an avalanche, stops the ship in its tracks. The trio laugh as they fly off into the sunset. And now we cut back to the ship. And Iroh says, the line that has to be in every show where kids are the main characters. Our greatest threat is just a little kid. And then it's immediately followed by, but I won't underestimate him, because look what he just did to us. We got flobberknocked. Every kid has to do that at some point. Every kid's show has to do that at some point. This one just got it out of the way fast. But also, Zuko makes sure to say, hey, after you're done thawing those guys out, dig us out and follow them. Which, Zuko's still following them. They're not safe yet. And then cutting to the unless you have something to add, Dylan.
No.
Cutting to the final scene. So Katara asks him how he did that because, quote, it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. With the water, with the giant water tornado. That is, I don't know if it was when we were recording, but Dylan mentioned that it is the like you mentioned thinking that was like cool as shit or whatever.
Yeah.
And like for sure, yeah, totally, no question about it. But like, and Katara even brings up like that is an amazing piece of bending. I've never seen anything like that, and Aang is even surprised by it. But he says he doesn't know how he did it. He just did it. So Aang doesn't even understand the Avatar state yet. And really the audience doesn't yet either. It's got some big things coming up. And then asks why he lied about being the Avatar, and he says because he never wanted to be, which hits real hard. Our hero, the main character, doesn't want to be a hero. He just wants to be a kid who gets to fly around the world, like he used to. He wanted to have what, to his people, is a normal life. Despite all of his skill. And this actually is reinforced by something we talked about earlier. When as soon as, a war or, something that he might have to solve gets brought up, he's like, oh, look, a penguin, I gotta go, bye! Which I don't think that was an accident. I think Aang was like, I gotta get out of this. And Katara even points out the fact that, like, the entire world is waiting on him to end the war. Like, you could have done something. And he's like, I never really wanted to be. And he's like, how do I do that? I am 12. And Katara brings up, hey, you've got to learn water, then earth, then fire, just like I said at the beginning of the episode, right? Well, we can go to the North Pole and learn together. And Aang's immediately like, yeah, and bam, you've got a show premise. Along with some pit stops that Aang came up with that might.
Yeah, that was another way to like alleviate the tension of that episode.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we have this super serious mission, and he's like, but first, let's do this.
First, let's go ride some fish. And I do really appreciate that, because that is a real downer. Like, hey, you're Jesus, and he's like, I really don't want to be Jesus. And she's like, what if we do it? What if we be Jesus together? Yeah, and we can ride fish while we're at it. But with all that, this is normally where in future episodes, once we've garnered an audience, this is where our audience appreciation segment will actually come in. It is this is where we'll read emails from you guys.
We'll reply to chat.
Yeah, we'll call out anyone who followed the Twitch page while we were streaming.
Just a general thank you to anyone who stayed to watch the whole thing, who commented, subscribed, gave us that email. It's always good to hear your guys' feedback on stuff like this, especially.
Yeah, for sure. And just as a reminder to everyone, if you're watching this on YouTube later and you want to watch us live, we do this every Friday night. We might miss a few Fridays here and there, but as far as we can help it. It'll be every Friday night on twitch.tv/SivartFarmer. Sivart Farmer is spelled SIVARTFARMER.
And don't forget, if you want to talk to us about this more, hit us up at our email, basingsebookclub@gmail.com. We're always open to you guys messaging us and interacting with us. It's great to interact with the audience.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Of course. And like I said earlier, we'll read your emails live on Twitch right here. It'll get posted on the YouTube channel as well. And if you want to know how to spell Bossing Say Book Club, that is BASINGSEBOOKCLUB @gmail.com. We'll see you guys there. We'll see you guys next week with the next episode. We'll see you guys there. I'm excited to watch it and talk about it with you guys.
And definitely come check us out tomorrow. We're probably going to be running some more Pokemon Emerald.
Oh yeah.
If you're into that.
I forgot to do some shameless self-promotion for our stream tomorrow. Yeah.
We're all about some shameless self-promotion here. We will be streaming tomorrow. Not sure what time it will be, continuing our monotype Pokemon Emerald run.
It'll be tomorrow afternoon to tomorrow evening. It'll probably be a long stream. They tend to go pretty long. The last one was like 4 hours or some shit.
But we have a good time. Hopefully you guys have a good time. And thank you guys for watching us again.
No, yeah. We'll see you guys later. Sivart out.